Cool. So I've been talking a lot recently about unconditional love. I don't know if you've seen any of that in the emails I've been sending out. Yeah.
Yeah, I read some of that stuff.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So I'm really excited about this topic of unconditional love right now. And last week I talked about unconditional love for ourselves and about how guilt and shame are often an obstacle that prevent us from feeling unconditional love for ourselves. So I talked about some strategies for making peace with our guilt and shame. And this week I wanted to talk about unconditional love for our experience or for our life. That's another big area where unconditional love can help us live happier lives. And so one common thing that makes it hard to love our current experience is when we have negative emotions, right? Or unpleasant emotions like fear or anger or sadness or heartache or loneliness. Any of those unpleasant emotions that those usually make us feel like we don't want to love our experience, right?
Yeah.
But one thing when we start exploring mindfulness and meditation, one kind of neat little trick that at least I discovered is that when we embrace negative emotions, they hurt far less than when we try to repress them. So a lot of the discomfort and pain and unpleasantness from negative emotions actually come from resisting the emotions rather than just allowing allowing our bodies and allowing our minds to just experience them fully. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. There's a series on pain relief that I've done on Calm. There's a lot of like 7-day series. And so I would do those because I've had 14 surgeries in the last 2 years. And absolutely just yes. And so labeling it like that feels like pressure, or that feels like stinging, or feels
Right.
like burning, or that feels like stabbing, and just like going with it and like imagining like it flowing through you like a river and just like flowing out, like, okay, now it's leaving. And then I find that helps me a lot.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to talk about. Some of those mindfulness strategies for coping with pain or any kind of negative emotion. And exactly like you said, one trick to um, to embrace the experience is to examine it like that and try to label it, try to figure out exactly. So you can start by figuring out where exactly in the body it is, trying to pinpoint. And even for emotions, not just physical sensations of pain, but even emotions, when we really look at them and examine them, oftentimes emotions are associated with a particular spot in the body, like our stomach or our neck or shoulders or chest or throat. And so that's kind of one first step towards embracing negative emotions, is identifying where in the body we're feeling them. And then, like you said, the next step to take that further is to identify or try to put a label on what kind of the texture of the sensation is. So it's like you said, is it sharp? Is it stingy? Is it dull? Is it aching? Is it a constant sensation, or does it ebb and flow in waves of intensity? And so I think, like you're saying, once you start doing that, when we really mindfully examine any kind of experience like that, it gives us some distance from it. It it makes it so that the sensation doesn't overwhelm us as much, and it allows us to not identify as strongly with a negative experience. And that allows, then like you said, that allows it to just kind of flow through us instead of getting stuck, or instead of us, because when we try to resist something, then when we try to resist those negative emotions, then they get kind of stuck, and then we just hold on to them and feel them over and over again. But like you said, when we allow them to flow through, they then our bodies are able to process them and express them, and then it just kind of is able to go on its way and stop bothering us. That's great. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that? It's a great example you're talking about of applying that to pain, to actual physical
Um,
pain from surgery.
I think it's great that you mentioned emotional pain to connect that because I never thought of doing that. I haven't run across that
Oh,
uh, idea before, or like it didn't sink in before. You know, sometimes you hear things and it goes in one ear and out the other, but I think that's something I can definitely use.
great. Yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, no matter how good our lives are, no matter how much in alignment we are with our higher selves or whatever, no matter how cleansed our chakras are, we're always still going to experience negative emotions and negative experiences in life. There's nothing that's just a part of life. You know, we're going to have pain, we're going to have sadness. And the more we can embrace those experiences, the less we suffer from them. And so yeah, and I've experienced this myself a couple times. Uh, Recently, my mom's dog died. I don't know if you heard about that, Lola.
Yeah, that's really sad.
Yeah, and that was really sad for me because I spent the last 2 summers with her, and so I got really kind of attached to Lola, and so yeah, that was really kind of painful for me, for especially the first few days. It just seems like this overwhelming sadness. But I try to practice these techniques that I preach. Try to put into practice what I'm actually talking about, and it does make it easier. It makes it easier to have the experience and just allow the emotions to process through. And they for really intense things like the death of a loved one, it can linger for days or even weeks. I mean that we can still keep feeling that sadness for a while, but the more we embrace them, the more we express it, the faster our bodies are able to process it, so that we can get back to having a not so painful experience of life.
Yeah, absolutely. I was recently rear-ended while sitting at a stoplight. Um, and in the past, I would have immediately started crying. But since I've started meditation, I just did some like deep cleansing breaths and I was able to kind of keep it together. I mean, I was still upset, but it wasn't the same level of upset as before, like I would have been in the past.
Awesome. Great. Yeah. Yeah. And like you said, I think anytime we're in the throes of a really intense emotion, and it might seem impossible to try to embrace it or examine it. And like you said, starting with the breath at that point is a great way, because when we're really caught up in an emotion, then our nervous system is hyperactivated and we're under a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. And breathing is a way to just kind of directly hack into our nervous system and start to calm it down. So taking deep, full breaths, and especially uh, extending the exhale so that it's longer than the inhale. And anytime we do that, anytime we extend the exhales, that's like
Okay.
that's a physiological trigger that triggers the parasympathetic nervous system, that activates the calming, relaxing branch of the nervous system. And
Is that
so,
like basically tricking your body into thinking it's like falling asleep?
or just relaxing generally, yeah.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, I heard an interesting statistic, or an interesting little fact, is that we think that the brain controls the body, right? We think that nerves run from our brain down to our body. But for every nerve that runs from the brain to the body, there's 4 nerves that run from the body back to the brain.
Huh.
Yeah. And so I mean, we think that the brain controls the body, but there's all this input coming from the body back to the brain. And so by affecting the body, we can actually affect the brain. And breath is one way to do that. By consciously controlling our breaths, we send these calming signals from the body up to the brain.
Well, that's neat. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting stuff.